Hello, I'm Katrina Wallace from Oliphant Cat, and if we haven't met before, I am a knitting teacher and designer based in Sydney in Australia, and I'm here with a walkthrough for my newest pattern, which is called the Travelling Bolero, which is what I'm wearing right now. So I really love this little jacket. It looks really cool. It's not super visible from the front, but all of the color work is really visible from the back. So I will pop a picture up on the screen of what it looks like. And it's a really easy first garment pattern. So if you are a newer knitter and you haven't knit a garment before, then this is a really good way to dip your toe in. So what you're going to need is the actual pattern, because you can't actually figure it out just from watching this video. You do actually need the pattern itself. And if you do grab the pattern, it has all of the instructions that you need in it. You don't actually have to watch this at all. It has all the descriptions for how to do the different stitches and all the different techniques and stuff. And so if you do just want to read it, then go ahead. You can just go grab it and not watch the video. But if you do want a little bit more help, then this should be quite helpful for you. And so for yarn, you need 2 different colors of fingering weight or 4-ply sock yarn. And it's a really good pattern to go stash diving with because it uses less than 1 skein of the main color and 1 to 2 skeins of the contrast color, depending on your size. And if you don't have any yarn handy, the pattern is actually written for Ren and Ollie's sock yarn, and Ren and Ollie are an awesome indie dyer based over in South Australia. And so you can go grab her yarn too. And I will pop a link to the pattern and the yarn down in the description box below. So I've actually been working on this piece for quite a while. So I'm going to show you what it was like from the very beginning and how I got started and set up, and then I'll just take you through making the whole thing. Okay, so one of my favorite things about this pattern is that it is fully customizable for size. So it doesn't matter what proportions or size you are, it's going to fit you because you put in your own measurements and then the pattern adjusts to fit your body. So I'm going to take you over to the computer and show you how to set everything up, because you use a spreadsheet to get all of the numbers for the stitch counts and measurements and things, and then you pop it into the pattern. So I'll show you that now. So here is our pattern, and it has at the start a whole sort of set of instructions on how to actually set the pattern up, but that's what I'm going to take you through. So the first thing that you have to do is take some measurements, and you only need 2 really simple measurements. So the first one is your shoulder width, which is the width from shoulder to shoulder over here. And the easiest way of doing that is to take a t-shirt that you like the fit of and measure across the shoulder seams of that. And you want a relatively tightly fitting t-shirt. And so this is me doing mine, and it measured 13 inches. You can also measure in centimeters, either will work. Just make sure that whatever you measure in is what you actually measure your gauge in as well. And then the second measurement you need is your upper arm circumference, which is the circumference of the widest part of your arm. And this is pretty easy to do by yourself as well. Just grab a measuring tape and pop it over your arm, loop it around your bicep, and take a look at what that says. And mine came out to 12.5. Okay, so now that you have the 2 measurements that you need, you can jump down to these instructions here. And so what you do is you click on this link here to open the spreadsheet, and that will open it up for you. And this here is a copy of the spreadsheet that is available to everybody who downloads the pattern. So you need to make a copy of it for yourself. And this is in Google Docs, but don't worry, it will work even if you don't have a Google Docs account. You don't need one. So if you don't have a Google Docs account, the best thing to do is to download the file as a spreadsheet file. So you click here on File, and then you go to Download, and you want to download it as an Excel file. So you just go ahead and click that, and that will save it onto your computer, and you can open that in Excel or in Pages on a Mac. But if you do have a Google Docs account, which is what I do, so I'm going to do that. You can make a copy of this for yourself just in your Google Docs account. So you go to File and you go to Make a Copy, and then you name it something that makes sense for you. And that will make a copy of the spreadsheet into your own account. And so what you do then is that if you can see here, there's a bunch of places up here where you should put in your measurements, and then everything down here will fill in automatically. So I'll show you that now. So I measured in inches, so I'm going to type into these two boxes. If you measured in centimeters, you should type in up here. So I had 13 inches across and 12.5 inches for my upper arm circumference. And so now if you'll notice, these numbers have all filled out, and these numbers down here have also all filled out. So this here is the yardage or the meterage that you'll need. It tells you how many meters and yards you need for each color. And then also if you are using the Ren and Ollie sock yarn, then it tells you how many skeins that you need. And then what you do with these numbers down here is spread out throughout the pattern. They're mostly towards the end, so we're just going to scroll all the way down. There are these bits that have a bold letter next to them and just like a blank space. And the letter here in the brackets corresponds to these letter here in this column here. So what you do is you find the number or the letter in this case that's associated with the bold letter, and you start putting it into the pattern. So 164 for the A, and then this B is B, and then C is 13, D is 5, and so you just keep filling it out like that all the way down. It goes all the way down to O, which is here at the end of page 8. And then that's it. Once you've done all of that, then you're set up and ready to go. I am using Preview to put the numbers and the letters in, which is a free program that comes with Mac. There are a couple of other programs you can get that are free that'll let you write into a PDF, but otherwise you can just print out the pattern and just write it in with a pen, because that's also always fun. And then once you're set up and ready to go, you can actually start knitting. So the first thing you want to do is to knit a gauge swatch, and do actually block it. And please don't skip this step, because mosaic knitting can change quite a bit after you wash it and block it. Then you start off the whole thing by doing a provisional cast on, and if you don't know how to do that, I will link to a tutorial video that I have on it, and there's also a link to the video in the pattern. Then once you've done your cast on, you just start knitting. So the main body of the Bolero is a big rectangle, and it uses mosaic knitting, which is a fun colorwork technique that I will show you a quick close-up of now. So the nice thing about mosaic knitting is that it only ever uses one color at a time. So if you can see here, I'm only using one strand. I'm not actually alternating two different colors, but it still looks like colorwork. So you use a chart, which is there in the background, and the way you do it is you slip stitches. So you see there how I slipped a couple of stitches, and that slip stitch process is what actually creates the colorwork. If you would like more details on how this all works, I have an entire workshop on how to do mosaic knitting, so I'll link to that up here in the corner, and there's also a link to it in the pattern. Also, once you're a few repeats in, the pattern's actually relatively easy to get the hang of and memorize. If you're the sort of person who likes to memorize charts, then I will give you a quick hint. The main pattern repeat is to knit 9, then slip 1, then knit 1, then slip 1. And that's it. You do that over and over again, and that'll get you most of the way there. And so it's an easy enough pattern to do that you can take it outside in your socially distanced, masked up park date with your daughter. I did a lot of this knitting in Sydney's lockdown, which is why I have the mask, and it was just nice to get out here and there. But yeah, I could do this while I was keeping half an eye on my toddler running around in the park and on the play equipment. So it really doesn't take a whole lot of concentration. You can get it done pretty quickly. I had some testers who honestly finished this whole thing in about 2 weeks. So it's a nice quick pattern once you get the hang of it. So once you're done with the main mosaic rectangle, you don't actually bind your stitches off, you're going to leave them live. So what you do is you cut your yarn, both of them, because they're both still attached at this point, and you grab some scrap yarn and you thread that onto a tapestry needle, and then you start transferring the stitches from your knitting needle onto the tapestry needle. So just slip them off the knitting needle straight onto the tapestry needle and start threading the scrap yarn through all of the live stitches. And you do that all the way down the length of your bolero until the scrap yarn is through all of the stitches. So once you're done, you want to stretch the bolero out so that the rectangle is as wide as it would naturally sit. Just make sure that you do that so you don't cut your scrap yarn too short, because you really don't want the stitches to fall off. Because the next thing that we're going to do at this point is to block it. So I like to wet block everything, so once your bolero is soaked for a while, press out the excess water in a towel, and then I actually use blocking wires, but you don't need them, you can just use pins. If you are using blocking wires, it's pretty straightforward for the top and the bottom. You just thread them through the live stitches at the top and the provisional cast on at the bottom. And then on the sides, you thread the wires through between the first and the second column of stitches like you would if you were picking up stitches with a knitting needle. So this is why I like using blocking wires, because they take a little longer to set up, but once they are set up, it makes it really easy to get your rectangle quite straight. So you just pop pins in periodically, and you can stretch the wire out to be the measurements that you need it to be. And because it's a wire, you only move it a little bit and the whole edge moves and becomes straight. And I'll pop links to all of my blocking equipment in the description box down below. So once the rectangle's dry, what you do is you take out the provisional cast on, and if you don't know how to do this, then pop over to the provisional cast on video that I linked to earlier, because it shows you how to actually undo the cast on at the end as well. So normally with a provisional cast on, what you do is you would put the live stitches onto your knitting needle, but in this pattern you actually want to put all the stitches onto some scrap yarn. So just grab some scrap yarn again and a tapestry needle and pick up the stitches off of the provisional cast on like you would with a knitting needle, but put them onto the tapestry needle instead, and then thread the scrap yarn through as you go. So I would put a bunch of stitches on at a time, usually like 5 to 10, and then take the provisional cast on out and unzip it like normal.
So once you've taken the scrap yarn out of the provisional cast on, what you're left with is live stitches on the top that are held with some scrap yarn, and live stitches on the bottom that are held with a scrap yarn. And at this point it doesn't really matter which end was the cast off and which row was the cast on, because it's basically symmetrical. And what you want to do now is to make the sleeve, you fold it in half so that the wrong side is facing outwards. And you pick up stitches from the left corner working your way in, and you take them off the scrap yarn and put them on the needle. And I actually find that this is much easier if you use a needle that's a bit smaller than the one you use to actually knit the piece. And the number of stitches that you need depends on the size that you put into the spreadsheet. So it will tell you in the spreadsheet and in the pattern how many stitches you actually need to pick up. So I'm going to do that now. Alright, so I've got all my stitches on the needle, so I'm going to pull the scrap yarn out. And leave it in the rest of the stitches that are still there. And then grab the other end of your circular needles and pick up the same number of stitches but on this back edge over here. So now you have the same number of stitches on the front and the back, and you grab your main colour and you do a 3 needle bind off. Just make sure that even if you used smaller needles to put the stitches onto, use the right size needle, like the same as your actual piece, to do this part as a 3rd needle. And if you don't know how to do a 3 needle bind off, I did an actual like dedicated tutorial just on 3 needle bind offs, so I will link to that up here.
So once you've bound off one sleeve, you turn it around and bind off the other sleeve in the same way, and then you can try your bolero on. So at this point, it's definitely not finished, but it's a decent indicator of what the size and the fit will be like. So I've recently really come around to the fact that you should try your knitting on as you make a piece, because it's much better to try things on and adjust as opposed to making a whole piece and having it not fit right. So I put in instructions into the pattern at this point that you should actually try it on, and some things you can do to change the fit if you want to. So once you're happy with the fit, you can start adding the edging. So the edging's all done in the contrast color, and it's all done in 2x2 ribbing. So for the collar, you put all of the live stitches that are still in the scrap yarn from the end of the rectangle and also from the provisional cast on. You take all of them and you put them onto the smaller needles and you join to work in the round, and then you knit all of the edging in 2x2 ribbing. And then for the sleeves, you pick up stitches along the edge like you would for picking up sleeves on any other sort of piece. You stick your needle into the spaces in between the first and second column of stitches at the edge of your knitting. Then you join that in the round and also work the sleeve edging in 2x2 ribbing as well. So the instructions for how many stitches you'll be picking up and joining in the round and where to do that and things are all in the pattern, and the number of stitches that you pick up and have as your collar and your edges are also some of the numbers that you filled out from the spreadsheet. And I am done with my piece.